Hey, this is Dr. Chad Kish. Welcome to Assessment in Physical Education. We are in Module 6, looking at Chapter 8, Developing, Culminating, and Progressive Assessments. This is the second part of this Chapter 8, so rely on your previous information from the last lecture. We'll start out actually by reviewing our previous lecture about culminating assessments. First of all, in our review, we need to remember a culminating assessment is a summative assessment that is at the end of a course or unit. It is usually the final performance or product that a student completes to provide some sort of data, score, or evidence, or maybe an artifact, that they have achieved the learning objective or the overall goal for that unit or course. It's designed to provide evidence that students have demonstrated the achievement of broad standards and specific unit goals. Remember, a broad standard would be a NASPE standard, while specific unit goals would be more of a learning objective, a GLE, grade level expectation, or one of our performance objectives, a three-part performance objective, such as the student will dribble the soccer ball between a set of cones in 30 seconds or less. The culminating assessment should be engaging and challenging. It shouldn't be something easy. It should be challenging and usually put together a variety of different things that are covered in the unit. A well-developed assessments need to be authentic and realistic to the content and life if possible. So go back and consider our real-world applications we've discussed in this class. How can we make this authentic to the performer to show something that you might do as a professional in the field? Make it as realistic as possible. And then last point of our review from last time, this can be an individual, a partner, or even a small group performance or product. We need to remember when we score those that we shouldn't score down a performer because their partner didn't do well. So that brings into another facet of our scoring and scoring guide. So what are we going to get to today? Here's today's big ideas. What is a culminating assessment? How do we plan culminating assessments? What are the guidelines for designing culminating assessments? And can you ask yourself the essential question, can I design a unit objectives, and a culminating assessment that is aligned and ties to a specific NASPE standard? All right, so that's what we're going to do today. So let's start out with progressive assessments. Remember, progressive assessments are formative assessments done throughout the lesson. They are done at different parts. A lot of times in physical education class, this is the teacher observation, or you might complete a checklist. So you're going to do your formative assessments throughout the lesson, provide feedback designed to be corrective actions and help students improve performance. Progressive assessments are designed to help students reach specific learning goals or performance objectives. Right? This could be, are we going to be able to perform and make our throws on target 80% of the time? Progressive assessments are designed to provide learning experiences and feedback within a unit. Each time a student does the progressive assessment, the next day or later in that lesson, there's going to be another assessment. And each learning experience, the teacher or coach provides feedback to lead to improvement till we get to the end game or the culminating assessment. Progressive assessment should be designed to get more difficult as the unit material advances and provide an increased amount of challenge along the way. And then progressive assessment should be designed to prepare the students for the summative assessment at the end of the unit. When you develop units, it's important to consider the concept of backward design we discussed earlier in this course. You look at the end goal, you go backwards and make a roadmap how to get there. Think about the stops along the way If you're going on a cross-country trip from New York to California, you're going to have some stops at night. These might be where you put in your progressive assessments. So progressive assessments can be considered the steps to reach the final goal, or building into the summative assessment. That is, our goal as teachers to provide instruction on different aspects of a unit and pull it all together in your culminating summative event. Progressive assessments can be designed to be combinations of previous learning to increase the complexity every step you make. And progressive assessment should be integrated into the learning to provide for continuous and challenging performance-based assessments. These should go on almost, if you have a 10-day unit, every day there should be a formative assessment within the lesson that gets more difficult and complex as it goes to provide the appropriate level of challenge. So progressive assessments, there's a progression of learning, and these activities involve a couple things. Extensions or remediations. They might include refinements, and there could be application tasks. All right? So an extension or a remediation would be extending the learning. If you have an advanced learner, how can you extend it? How can you make it more difficult? Could you make them do something that's more challenging? If you need a remediation, if you have a struggling learner, what are some things you can do with that struggling learner to take a step back and help them learn a previous step along the way? A refinement. This would be when somebody is starting to approach being a competent performer and you're refining a certain area or part of the skill. This could be they have the stance correctly, but there might be an error in the preparatory phase. How can we fix that? This is where corrective actions come into effect. And then last is application task. How can we take our skills and learning and apply them to a more real life or authentic setting? That might even be applying them to a game-like setting. So let's talk about some examples of culminating performances and products in physical education. Think about the performance of a gymnastics routine. All right? Anytime you might teach an idea, this was right from the textbook in this chapter, if you read the chapter, where they talked about building in from tumbling activities, different certain lessons on tumbling, into the final or culminating product of a gymnastics routine. That would be a performance, not a product. All right? You might also do something like have the students choreograph and perform a creative routine or dance. All right? There's a lot of different things. You can teach different steps along the way. You can teach them different dance movements, allow them to put that together into a creative routine or a dance. You might have students develop a brochure. You might have a health topic, fitness, sport, strength training center program, or even a sport. I like to do a camp brochure a lot of times at the end of the sport and have the students explain the different tasks and strategies and skills they would teach at a sports camp. So that helps you understand if they know all the different skills that go into that specific sport. You might develop a multimedia presentation on a relevant topic. This could be a video presentation on possibly a world or an international sport. It could be developing a commercial on a product related to sport for television. Or if you've seen TED Talks, you could even have students make their own TED Talks. You could create and teach a game, a group challenge, or an activity. This would be when you give students some equipment and you teach them a variety of movement patterns, but you let the students make up the rules with the equipment you've given them to develop some kind of creative game or group challenge, and they can take the class through that. This is a fun activity to do and look at some creativity. You might even take a field trip to use the skills. This could be a fishing trip, going camping, hiking, doing a climbing wall or a ropes course, Or after you've taught the Frisbee unit, you could build up to Frisbee golf and take your students to a Frisbee golf course. Some other examples of culminating performances and products in physical education could be developing a class newspaper or a newspaper or web-based article on the unit content, right, or topic. You might have them pick a certain topic and everybody write a blog type of article on it. You might design, direct, and videotape an instructional video on a sport, dance, or some kind of fitness content. This could be similar to your multimedia presentation, but more of an instructional video where you go step by step, teaching somebody a certain task within your video. It's more instruction based. You might develop a portfolio. This could be an individual portfolio or a team portfolio. You could look at the teaching games for understanding curriculum model and have them keep information on invasion games in one section and net games in another section and target games in another section. And then in that portfolio, they could write reflections on how these games are similar and how they are different even within a category. You could have students keep a log of participation to document things such as physical activity or nutrition, right? This should include some kind of reflection statement to determine if you understand the process and what you've learned. That is actually our lab that we had last class period that's due here shortly. And last but not least, we could design a personal fitness program. This could be where students take all the different things they've learned in health-related fitness, maybe strength training, and design their own personal fitness program and how that could relate to them becoming more healthy. So the textbook discussed a tumbling unit in elementary PE. And I know a lot of us aren't probably real familiar with tumbling, but let's consider a tumbling unit in elementary PE. Think about this. Students are taught various tumbling skills, and they have a chance to practice each one. This is going to be done over several days, and you'll have some formative assessment each day to help lead the students into improvement. How can you do this? You can use a checklist each day as a formative assessment for a variety of skills. This could be a teacher-done checklist. You might even have a peer evaluation if you're in upper elementary, or you could use a video evaluation and let students use the checklist looking at their own performance, as well as you as the teacher look at the video and complete the checklist. Once we find out the data and statistics from this formative assessment, we can use the results to plan our next set of learning experiences. Next, students are videotaped attempting skills. Students can watch their own video, use that checklist, and then do a self-observation to determine where they stand and what they can improve upon. You'll follow that up by allowing students to practice and perform now individual skills first, and then putting some of these different skills together in combinations. Start with independent practice, then bring in some small group practice with both the teacher and possibly the peers providing some feedback. And finally, you'll have your students share conclusions and feelings about the tumbling unit in a journal or discussion. Now, how can we build this from individual tumbling skills, using formative assessments on a daily basis, progressing to videotapes, allowing students to not only practice individual skills, but combination of skills? We have students really journal and discuss and have a deeper understanding. That builds us into the culminating performance. This is where we could have a class tumbling or gymnastics meet. All right? How would we do that? We would provide guidelines for the meet and give students a scoring guide. So we would give specific guidelines such as the routine must meet these following things. It must be 30 seconds long. You must use 6 different tumbling skills you've learned throughout the unit, and you must complete your performance with a balanced skill holding it for 5 seconds. All right, you would give the students a scoring guide, and this is how we would judge their performance. How do you do this? You can do a couple of different things. You can put students into teams, and we will use both individual and team scores. All right, that helps students work with each other, encourage each other, and motivate each other. And students that are not very good performers still can feel some success if their team does well. So we'd start out with each student performing their routine. We would videotape the students attempting the skills so we can not only, as the teacher, observe and run the event, we can come back and provide an observational method for scoring later. We might do scoring right on the spot if we are a competent scorer for a tumbling meet or gymnastics. The last thing, we'll take individual scores, tell them to the students, and we will add up their team scores to use for judging for the meet. Just like the Olympics, individuals can get medals as well as the different countries can get medals. So use the top 2 or 3 scores. You might do this. You'll take your team score. We have 5 people on a team. We're going to take the top 3 scores, add them together, and make an average. Or you could eliminate the top score and the bottom score, take the middle 3 scores and have an average. All right, there's a lot of different ways you can count your team scores in this. So let's identify some progressive assessments. Remember, progressive assessments are considered formative assessments, and they take place within the scope of the unit. They may be a summative assessment for the day, but in the scope of the unit, they're completely formative and they're helping students build skills to the end goal. We want to complete these assessments in some kind of sequence throughout the unit, and the sequence should be done to systematically build skills and increase in difficulty. If you complete it in sequence through the unit, we can provide feedback, continue to improve and learn, and they really act as checkpoints in the learning so we can push students to achieve their overall unit end goal. Remember, progressive assessments are progressive. They should get a little bit harder and increase in difficulty as we go. It's important to consider them as steps to meeting an end goal. All right, remember, we talked earlier today and in this course about backward design. So your progressive assessments are steps along the way of our trip across the country. Progressive assessments, they should be designed to be aligned with the unit goals and the end goal in mind. So when you're developing your unit, if you're building a variety of skills, all those skills should step up the ladder to the end goal. We shouldn't have a skill and an assessment that has nothing to do with the end goal. We need to stay in alignment. So, our assignment for this video presentation and this section of the chapter and module is take your Journal 8 activity we completed in class last time and do this A and B. So take your journal number 8 and your assignment from last time, and for A, list and explain your culminating summative assessment. Make sure this is an updated version of answer 4 from Journal 8 and or your planning culminating assessments assignment. Make sure you've looked at your feedback from that assignment to improve the answer and then put it here in A. You want for B, then you will identify and explain 5 progressive assessments. So consider this using backward design. You're looking at your culminating summative assessment. That's how you're going to assess the end of the lesson. And then now I need 5 steps along the path to get there. So you're going to explain 5 progressive assessments that build your students' skills throughout your unit to get to your summative assessment. You're going to list these in order 1 through 5. All right, so start with the easiest one, move on to the next one, put them in a sequence that you would teach them, and progressively get a little bit more difficult as you go. So for 1 through 5, what you're going to do, you're going to provide 2 or more sentences explaining each progressive assessment. Explain what it is, and explain how you're going to score, what kind of scoring guide you're going to use. All right. These should be designed to assess some learning goals. So if you had your learning goals, your 5 learning goals were well written in your planning culminating assessment assignment, you should consider these as the 5 progressive assessments along the way. What do I mean when I say explain it? Explain the assessment. What are you going to do? We will use a skills test to test if students can complete the bounce pass successfully 80% of the time or more. We will use a modified gameplay and score that on a holistic rubric to see if the students can play soccer. All right, so explain what it is and then tell me if you're going to use a checklist, a point scoring checklist, a standard rubric based on the skills, a gameplay rubric, or a holistic rubric. So explain what it is in 1 or 2 sentences and then give me the scoring guide for each of these 5. All right, post this to Canvas by your deadline that you'll see. So check out the assignment on Canvas and the deadline's posted. So before we move on to our to-do list and get you ready for a couple other things, I want to briefly go over the final assignment for this course again, the culminating activity. I want to give you some final thoughts on accountability for assessment. When you expect students to learn and achieve broad standards, NASPE standards, and specific goals, your grade level expectations or lesson goals, in your classes, you must really plan for that to occur. It doesn't occur any other way. You have to consider your end goal, find out steps to reach that goal, and then design your lessons with your performers in mind. You should give students goals to reach and then plan the steps to achieve those goals. Your assessments are designed to let you know what students can do at each point in time if it's a formative assessment, or if they have reached their goal as a summative assessment. And remember, assessments are used to hold yourself accountable to ensure that your instruction is actually teaching the students the skills and improving performance, as well as it holds your students accountable for learning, performing, and trying to achieve some of the challenging progressive assessments along the way. So here's our to-do list. First of all, the assignment I just explained, the progressive assessment assignment, post that to Canvas. Go back and look at your assignment from earlier this module, look at your feedback, and use that considering the idea of backward design, and then develop your 5 progressive assessments. You're supposed to have read Chapter 8, so I need you to complete the Chapter 8 quiz. That's on Canvas, and there's no multiple choice, multiple guess, or true and false. This is a completion question type of quiz that's essays. So make sure you're reading the chapters as we go because there's a Chapter 8 quiz. Make sure you complete that on Canvas by the deadline. Our next module will be on Chapter 13, Grading and Physical Education. So go ahead and read that chapter before we meet in class next time. And then at the end of Chapter 13, we'll have our Unit 2 exam. So you should start studying for the Unit 2 exam by reading the chapters, reading your classroom notes, and just going over some of the basic information that you might have highlighted or picked up. So remember, our culminating summative activity for the course is an activity for developing an assessment plan in physical education and wellness. This activity is challenging, has real-world applications. It's actually exactly what a PE teacher will do when they develop an assessment plan. What we'll do is we will assess your depth of knowledge and skills in understanding how to plan an overall unit assessment strategy, considering a variety of things. This activity is modeled after an actual task, like I said, that PE teachers do as part of the teaching and learning process and development of assessments that are both formative, summative, culminating. All right? The instructions and template for this assignment are on Canvas. This is to be submitted to Canvas in Module 10. So look ahead to Module 10, look at the assignment. If you look at Module 10, there's a page that has these two documents, both the assignment instructions and the template. This is a challenging, culminating activity that pulls everything together for the course. So when you go to Module 10 and you pull up the assessment plan, signature assignment, lesson document, all right, it'll explain this assignment to you, and I'm going to go ahead and walk you through it. We did it in person in class the other day, but if you need to come back and watch this again, if you're a little confused on the assignment, it's right here. So the assignment objective is the student's going to develop a detailed assessment plan for a physical education unit. This is a culminating and summative activity for our PEP 320 assessment class. It's designed to assess your ability and understanding of various concepts from the course associated with planning and scoring of an aligned and progressive assessment for a unit. This culminating activity is challenging. It has real-world applications and is used to assess your depth of knowledge and skills in planning an overall unit assessment strategy. The activity is modeled after an actual task that PE teachers do to complete as part of the planning, teaching, and learning and assessment process. Remember, your plan should follow the assignment format and outline. There's a template provided. Use the template from Canvas. Download that template, save it, fill in everything else, save it again, and then submit that template as your assignment. That should really help you out. What is our performance objective? If you know how to write performance objective, they're in a task, condition, and criteria method. The task is what are you going to do? The condition is how are you going to do it? And the criteria is how well. So the candidate will develop a detailed assessment plan for a physical education unit using the assignment outline to effectively prepare an align and sequence assessment plan scored in the skilled category for the Missouri Teaching Standards. When you look at your rubric, we want you to be in the skilled category or above. So here's the instructions. You're going to use various background assignments from the course to help you develop a detailed assessment plan for a PE unit. All right, you're going to pick one unit, look at some of your previous assignments. They should fit in this assignment scoring, or they should fit in this template a lot. All right. So the assignment's going to be scored on the attached rubric, and we'll get there, and it is associated with the Missouri Teaching Standards. Here's the deadline for 2020. So here's your assignment formatting instructions. You're going to follow the basic outline for the unit plan development. You'll follow the basic outline for the assessment plan assignment. I had to scratch that. Students will use the provided outline and format in the completion of the summative assignment. So part one is your basic information. You're going to detail the basic information for your assessment plan, and you're going to use the NASPE Standards handout that should be in your portfolio as a reference. So you choose any lesson you want. So you're going to list and explain your unit in about a paragraph. So you can pick a physical education unit. You can pick something such as outdoor education or fitness and wellness, or you can pick a sport such as soccer, basketball, baseball, softball. If you feel like you want to be a college level teacher, you can pick a college level unit based on a specific area for a professional in the field. So if you don't want to do this as a physical educator, consider the career you want to go into and that you're teaching a graduate class while you're obtaining your degree. So if you want to be a physical therapist or an athletic trainer, you might talk about the rehab of a knee injury. Or if you want to be a strength and conditioning coach, you might talk about developing a strength training program. So B, you'll list the primary NASPE standard. That's the one that is pretty much the main focus of your unit. And then if you have any other NASPE standards that come into effect, you'll list those into C. Most of the other four will be there, so describe how they relate to your unit. Part 2, we've talked about backwards design quite a bit. So you're going to use a backward design approach to develop your overall unit assessment plan. You'll start by detailing 5 or more critical components for your unit. These are the most important skills, concepts, or knowledge students will have to perform to show mastery in your unit. So use your backwards design assignment and journal number 6 as a reference to help you with part 2. So in part 2A, list 5 or more critical components for the unit. That's not critical components of a skill on a rubric. These are the most important components for the unit. So if you're doing a net game, such as volleyball or tennis, you might talk about the serve, the volley. If it's volleyball, you might talk about the spike, offensive strategies, defensive strategies, blocks. All right? So what are the most important skills for your specific unit? And then B, list and explain a culminating summative assessment. I want you to do this in one paragraph. So remember, this is backward design. We're looking at 5 important things and then how we're going to get to the end game. All right? This assessment should be designed to test at least 3 of your critical components in some kind of culminating event. Part 3 is assessments. You will list and explain various assessments that will be used in order to assess student learning and performance for your unit. You need to explain a pre-test used to set a baseline and check for progress. You might use that again as a post-test later. You'll explain 5 different assessments to check understanding for the performance of each of your 5 critical components you put in part 2. So you'll take your 5 critical components, you'll bring them down here, and you're going to explain how you would actually assess them now. And then you're also going to detail a real-world assessment to allow students to display their understanding in a practical application like a professional in the field would. Use your classroom notes from the textbook to detail a pretest, 5 different types of assessments for your formative assessment, and there's a variety of assignments and classroom notes we had on real-world connections or applications. Use that as a reference for part 3. So here's what you'll do. In part 3, you'll have an A, B, and C. A, explain your pretest in one paragraph. Explain what it is. Remember, you'll also use the same test as a post-test. This can be a variety of assessment types and should be used to assess the basic skills or knowledge prior to teaching the unit, and again, to assess progress near the end. B, you're going to list and explain your 5 formative assessments. You'll detail 5 different assessment types you will use, all right, and you're going to pick one for each of these 5 critical components of your unit. So list the 5 critical components from part 2, section A, 1 through 5, and in 2 to 3 sentences explain an assessment. And they need to be 5 different assessment types, all right? And then C, discuss your real-world application or assessment in 1 to 2 sentences. So list and explain 3 real-world assessments, 1 to 2 sentences each, that could be used to check for student understanding and performance of your unit. These are practical assessments that allow students to perform the skills like a professional would do in the field. Number them 1 to 3. Let's get down to part 4. This is your scoring guides. You're going to explain your scoring guides here. So you will describe the scoring guides you're going to use for all of our different assessments. For the pre-test, for all 5 of your formative assessments, and your culminating summative assessment. So you're going to take 1 to 2 sentences and describe the assessment type and how you will use it to score your participants. All right? Use your classroom notes and the textbook to detail various scoring guides you might use. You should also use the following assignments as a reference: developing a checklist, journal number 6, developing a rubric, your holistic rubric assignment, and developing progressive assessments. All right, so under your scoring guides, you have an A, B, and C. A, detail the scoring guide for your pretest. So look back to part 3, section A for your pretest, provide the type of scoring guide you'll use and explain how you will use it. In B, detail the scoring guide for each of your formative assessments. Remember, there's 5 of those. So go to part 3, section B, list number 1 through 5 under B here, and provide the type of scoring guide and explain how you will use it in each of these. And C, detail the scoring guide for your culminating summative assessment. So you need to go back to Part 2, Section B, put this in your culminating summative assessment here, explain what it is, and provide the type of scoring guide and how you will use it. Now you will actually, in Part 5, develop 2 different scoring guides. All right? So you're going to provide 2 types of scoring guides for use in your unit. You will explain, develop, and provide a checklist to score a specific skill, a performance, or a student project. So just pick one of your formative assessments and develop a scoring guide for that. All right? So go to Part 2, Section B, pick one of those, and develop a checklist. You'll also provide either a task-specific or holistic rubric that can be used for your culminating summative assessment. So go back to Part 2 and pick that out. Use your classroom notes and textbook to help you in developing these various scoring guides. You should also use the following assignments as a reference: developing a checklist, journal number 6, developing a rubric, Part 1 and the full rubric, holistic rubric assignment, and your assignments related to progressive assessments. There is an assignment template with the rubric templates for both the checklist, a task-specific rubric, and a holistic rubric, and you can develop these scoring guides. If you develop all 3 on the template, you can choose 2 out of 3. If you develop all 3, there's an opportunity for some extra credit. All right? So this really explains A, how to develop a checklist, and B, how to develop a rubric under Part 5 here. So look at your assignment guide and read into this, and it'll discuss some of the different assignments you can use and how to go back and develop your checklist or your rubric. The assignment guide also has some additional assignment information and assignment expectations. And then if you scroll down, here is a detailed assessment rubric that explains each criteria here. We have our levels: developing, skilled, and excellent. Our goal is to be at least skilled. All right. If you get into the excellent category, that's where you're going to start getting an A on the assignment. And you see all of your performance indicators listed in here. If you look closely, the Missouri teaching standards that are associated with each criteria are also listed. The Missouri teaching standard number 7 is intertwined here a lot because it is the standard that focuses on using assessment. And then the last one is your formatting and detail. Make sure you follow your format. And then this is basically, you will see this is your blank rubric, and this is where your score would go, how many points are possible, and your criteria are over here. All right. If you have any questions on this summative assignment, please get in touch with me and we can go over it before we go fully remote for Thanksgiving. All right. Have a great day. Make sure you're doing all the things you need to do for this unit. So I'll go back to our to-do list. Finish your assignment, progressive assessments. Finish your Chapter 8 quiz, which is all completion type questions. Read Chapter 13 before we meet again. And at the end of Chapter 13, we'll have our Unit 2 exam, so start studying. All right. Have a great day. We will see you next time. And remember, developing assessments is critical to use a backward design process. Consider your end goal, and then your formative assessments that are progressive should go step by step, thinking about climbing a ladder to get to that end goal.